Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Delegate Linda Foley. I represent District 15 in Montgomery County, and I am the chair of the Non-Energy Utilities Subcommittee of the Environment and Transportation Committee. We have various members from the both the subcommittee and the full Environment Transportation Committee on this call. And in this briefing, and I do want to acknowledge that we have both our chair and our vice chair on this committee, Delegate Mark Corman, our chair, and Delegate Michelle Guyton, our vice chair, are both on this in this briefing. Before we get started, let me just quickly go over the agenda. This is a briefing on the Potomac interceptor rupture that we all know has caused this major ecological disaster. I've seen it characterized as one of the major ecological disasters in the eastern part of the United States. It is not only polluting the Potomac, but it is also threatening the Chesapeake Bay and environs. And we have 3 panels today. And before we get to our panels, I just want to ask our chair, Mark Corman, if he would like to say anything before we get started.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So really appreciate you doing this briefing. As you noted, this is in District 16, my district. So obviously it affects more places than that, but I was out there last weekend, and I do want to thank all the people who have been responding to the incident. Until recently, the conditions were really rough. They were out there in the ice storm and the very cold weather, working very hard to try to mitigate this. But there's still a lot of work left to do. So really appreciate you holding this briefing and bringing the situation to light, and look forward to today's conversation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, well, let's get started. And we'll first begin with our panel representing the District of Columbia Water. This is a DC water issue, not a Maryland-based utility water issue and sewer issue. So in this case, it's DC water. And I understand we have David L. Gaddis, who is the CEO and general manager of DC Water, and maybe he'd like to say a few words before we get into the nitty-gritty of the panel. Maybe he's not here. Okay, well, with that, let's move on. So on the panel, we have Matthew Brown, Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President of DC Water, and Dr. Musa Wone, Chief Engineer and Vice President of Engineering. So Matt, I know you're on and you have a presentation to share with us. So if you would like to begin, we'd like to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to try to bring up the presentation. I understand that there's perhaps a backup on your end. I'm having some trouble here. Apologies. I'm not able to share with the button here.
Whoever's doing the live stream, or I mean, whoever's doing the Zoom, would you please make sure that Matt can share?
I apologize, Madam Chair.
Well, maybe, okay, there we go. All right, we got it. Good. All right, great.
Apologize. So yeah, let me just clear the screen here. Okay, great. If you all can see that, I will proceed. And my name is Matt Brown. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for DC Water. Joining me today is Dr. Musa Wone. He is the Chief Engineer. We have a few slides to go through, and then obviously we're happy to answer any questions that you have. So for those who are not familiar with the Potomac Interceptor, it is an asset that was constructed in the early 60s. It was authorized by the U.S. Congress, runs as far out as Dulles Airport, and conveys flow all the way into the southern part of the District of Columbia, where it's treated at the world's largest wastewater treatment plant at Blue Plains. The construction was a combination of what we call cut and cover. So that's a picture that's represented on the left, where you can see the gentleman standing in the tunnel, as well as, or the pipe rather, excuse me, and as well as tunneling through rock. And so both of those construction methods are demonstrated there. Serves a large community, Fairfax and Loudoun counties, the town of Vienna, Herndon, Dulles Airport in Virginia, and Montgomery County, Maryland. And we've put locations there for both the Great Falls water intake, which is upstream of the break location, and then the Little Falls water intake. The Washington Aqueduct is using the Great Falls water intake, and therefore drinking water is not impacted. The interceptor is about 54 miles long. It ranges in diameter from 30 inches to 96 inches. It carries between 40 and 60 million gallons on a typical day of flow from the various communities that I mentioned earlier, all the way to Blue Plains. And again, the break location is noted on this slide. The diameter at the break location is about 72 inches. And this is the specific location of the break just to the just near 495 on Cabin John Parkway. I'm sorry, Clara Barton Parkway. I apologize. Clara Barton Parkway has been an important artery in order to move materials as well as get our crews into the site. It's also been important with us to work with the Park Service and ensure that that travel remains open for use. I think it's important to talk about the timeline here and present some information about the work that DC Water has done from the time that the break occurred on January 19th, and then also review some of the information below about the estimated flow volumes that reached the Potomac River. So the break happened on January 19th, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We were alerted. We have a odor control facility that is right next to the break. We became aware from our security cameras that there was movement at the site. Upon investigation, we determined that there was indeed a overflow at the site, a pipe collapse. This happened into the evening. By the morning of January 20th, we had people inside on the 19th, had a clearer idea of what was going on January 20th, and responded very quickly. We worked with the National Park Service. As many of you know, we are using the C&O Canal to bypass flows in order to remove them, prevent them from entering the Potomac River. All of that was done. Pipes were put in place. The big plastic pieces of the pipes that take the flow into the C&O Canal were fused on site. We did as much work as we can in advance of what we knew was going to be a large snow and ice storm, and we knew it was going to be very, very cold. We had a goal of getting all of that in place by January 26th. Things went very, very well that week, and in just a few short days, we were able to clear the canal, work with the Park Service to remove the lock gates, prepare downstream channels, and I have a diagram and some pictures to show you the amount of work that was done there. And then we did some reinforcement of the Potomac Interceptor so that we could put the flow back into it. All of that was done, and we started operating the pumps on January 24th. It was Saturday evening. Many of us were there, including the Park Service, to watch the operation go live. And so we're very pleased we were able to bring on 40 million gallons a day of pumping capacity with 2 sets of 3 pumps each. On January 27th, we were able to bring on additional pumping capacity. So the pumping capacity increased from 40 million gallons a day to 60 million gallons a day with 2 additional pumps. Those are online on January 27th. Then we began immediately investigating and excavating in the area of the break. And you may have heard from media sources that we have found some very large boulders at the bottom of the pipe. It appears that during construction of this pipe, the pieces of the rock that were used, that came from the blasting, were used as fill. And so we believe that is where the rocks came from for the pipe. So what we are doing right now is we are constructing a bulkhead near 495. We are adding additional pumping capacity. We'll have pumping capacity of nearly 100 million gallons a day. We're also working on additional pumping for spares. You may have heard about the clogging of our pumps as a result of flushable wipes. So this is a good opportunity to ask constituents to not flush what even are labeled as flushable wipes. They're causing issues with our pumps. Nevertheless, you can see across the bottom the progress that we've made in reducing the flows into the Potomac River. So during the period from January 19th through January 24th, before the bypass was constructed, about 194 million gallons of sewage entered the Potomac River. By January 24th, when we were able to put the 6 pumps online, that was reduced pretty substantially. And after the additional pumps were put into service on January 27th, those flows were decreased even further. The risk of flow entering the Potomac River exists until we can get the flow back into the Potomac Interceptor. Right now, it's bypassed through the C&O Canal and then routed back into the Potomac Interceptor. And so that is our goal. That is what we are working towards. And there are people on site 24 hours a day working to make this happen. This is what the site looks like. And I know there's a lot of information here. The top gray line is the Potomac Interceptor. So the dots along the way are manhole entries into the Potomac Interceptor. And so we've made use of those manholes in order to lift the flow out of the Potomac Interceptor and move it to the C&O Canal. You can see the red X in the middle. That is where the failure occurred. And so what the challenge was is to move upstream, get the flow out of the pipe as much as we could, put it into the Potomac Interceptor, and then downstream, put it back into the Potomac Interceptor. So the C&O Canal is illustrated in the yellow color with the historic locks. In blue, you'll see two sets of 3 pumps. It's manhole 18.7 and manhole 18.A, where the 3 pumps provided the initial pumping capacity. The additional pumps were brought online in manhole 18, and that brought up the pumping capacity. Because of the rock situation, we are currently adding an additional flume. So downstream where the yellow lines are, we constructed 3 dams, cofferdams, as well as an earth embankment. We constructed, so what went live on the night of the 24th was a 60-inch flume and a 48-inch flume. To the left of that is another yellow line with green dashes. That is a flume that is being constructed now in order to increase the capacity of the canal to receive sewage and get it back into the Potomac Interceptor. And then obviously the Potomac River is the blue on the bottom. The flow before it was contained in the C&O Canal went through a drainage canal under the C&O Canal and entered the Potomac River. Dr. Wong, can you talk a little bit about our work?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, Musa Wan. I am the chief engineer for DC Water. So in this table here, we just are capturing here our activities that what we did on site. So our first order of business, as Matt Brown said, was to complete the bypass. So the bypass was, in our initial schedule, the bypass was, we were planning on completing the bypass on the 26th, but we were able to complete it on the 24th, basically. We beat that schedule because, as Matt Brown said, we had these crews working 24/7 on that side, despite, all this cold and freezing temperature what we have out there. And then our next step was to excavate downstream of the pipe and clean and identify scope of blockage. So that one also was completed. Since we have done that one, it's not we believe, small overflows can continue to happen. As Matt Brown stated, until we transfer all the flows into the Potomac Interceptor, we may have these, small overflows coming out of the pipe. Reason being is that, as Matt also stated, if the pumps, we have to stop them and clean them because of the grease or rag. So then we may have these things at the peak, usage of that pipe. So right now, what we are working on is to construct a bulkhead. The reason why we want to construct that bulkhead is basically to isolate a section between manhole 8, where we have the break, and downstream, so we can access the pipe and remove those boulder, like Matt Brown also stated in his presentation. This one, we think it's going to take 4 to 6 weeks. We're doing very good progress there, but we think, we're going to be on schedule or beat that schedule. And after we finish that one, then we're going to revert to the permanent repair of the pipe, because once we have all the flows are contained in the existing pipe, and we have also these open pit that's going to be just a portion of the pipe that is open. Now we contain all the flow out there. We can start the permanent repair of the pipe. Right now, for our estimate, it's around 9 months. And once we start a permanent estimate, we believe, and actually I will say we are certain, so we will no longer have overflows going to the Potomac River.
Thank you, Dr. Won. Madam Chair, these are some pictures of the site. The top left shows the overflow from the collapsed section of pipe. This is the condition that existed on the Monday night of Dr. Martin Luther King Day. The image you can see in the back, what looks like a little building, that is our odor control facility, and that's where the camera was. The picture to the right is the overflow around the drainage channel, and that's what brought the flow into the Potomac River. The emergency response, and these are pictures as it was being set up. We set up the bypass pumping, so this is one of the two sets of pumps. So there were 3 in 2 sets. And you can see all of that material was fabricated on site or fused on site in order to, those pumps go down into the manholes and pump the water out and then convey it overland and back into the C&O Canal. The cofferdam downstream is what you see in the middle, the bottom picture on the middle. So there are 2 cofferdams as well as the land dam that we created. And then those are the flumes that bring the flow back into the Potomac Interceptor. This is the bypass in operation. The top left picture was taken the Saturday night that we were able to turn the pumps on. It was a very happy sight for those of us who were on site to be able to see the flow entering the C&O Canal, because that meant it was no longer entering the Potomac River. You can see the flow in the discharge channel in the middle, and then the flow dropping back down to the manhole to be conveyed to Blue Plains in order for treatment. The safety of our workers is important. The safety of the public is important. And so we have installed fencing along the towpath of the C&O Canal. As you all know, this is a well-recreated area. We want to help ensure that people are safe. Our excavation operations are the bottom left picture. So you can see us working in order to reach the pipe. It's about 20 feet down, 20 feet underground. And so that is the excavation, as well as the picture of the rock section that is in the pipe. As Dr. Won said, in order to reach the rocks, what we need to do is completely shut off flow in through that pipe. And so this is the bulkhead and bypass pumping chamber that's being constructed near 495. This is where we will have 100 MGD of pumping capacity, and that will lift the flow out and follow the same route, put it into the put it into the C&O Canal so that it doesn't reach the Potomac River. Environmental impact is important to us. I'll talk in a little bit about what we're doing on the 3 main sites that have been impacted by the spill. There are testing locations that we have identified, and we started our testing on January 29th. So upstream is Old Anglers Inn. We're doing testing at the drainage channel, Fletcher's Boathouse, Georgetown, the Anacostia River, and at National Harbor. I understand there are other organizations who are doing additional testing, and we obviously welcome that. We have published our results online. Generally, the EPA and public health recommendation is that swimming is not recommended when E. coli levels are above 410. The levels near the drainage channel continue to exceed that. And the other locations, they have been under 410 since the beginning of February. I do want to address one thing head on. Communication has really been important to us, being transparent and providing information. We had a procedure that in order to get these results on as quickly as possible, they were being read out from the lab and then transcribed and posted on our website. We did discover that there was an error in some of the results. It was discovered by us. We let the public know in our release that we were making some corrections, and we made those immediately. It was a transcription error. We obviously regret that error, and we put in new procedures so that does not happen again. But it was in a rush to be transparent and a rush to provide the information to the public that an error was made. We obviously regret that. We'll continue to do sampling at the site, and we will post our results. I mentioned earlier about environmental restoration. We've actually had people from the National Park Service and the Maryland from MDE on site today, walking areas. The impacted areas that we've identified are obviously the C&O Canal, where the flow is being conveyed now, the drainage channel, where the flow went from the break under the C&O Canal and then into the Potomac River, and then obviously the Potomac River from the shore to Swainson Island, where we're doing the testing. We're working with, again, Park Service and MDE and other agencies to determine what needs to be done in those areas in order to mitigate the environmental impact there. We want to do the cleanup as soon as we can. It will likely be done in phases so that we can minimize impacts to those who use the canal, especially before the weather turns warm. I mentioned earlier how important it is for us to communicate. We've been able to have this conversation with many. We had the EPA senior leadership from EPA on site yesterday. We're very pleased to be here today to provide this briefing to you and to answer questions. We've done calls with EPA, DOE, MDE, and other agencies of District Department of Energy and the Environment. Chair Corman, we appreciate and welcome the questions that you've asked us and hope we've been responsive to those. We look forward to that continued engagement. We put signage along the C&O towpath canal in addition to the fencing, warning recreation users. We've also put signage at the discharge location on the river, and then our media and communications team has done a lot of interviews on site, in person, and answered questions. We've also published daily updates. Those go on our website every single day. What's really been helpful is we've embedded someone from our communications department who attends those meetings and helps us be able to explain what we're doing, what challenges exist, and how our progress is coming along on a daily basis. So I hope that you have access to those, and I'm happy to share where that information is or put you on the direct distribution list. Dr. Won, can you talk about the work we've planned on doing on the Potomac Interceptor?
Sure. Yeah, for the Potomac Interceptor, so DC Water was actually in active planning. As you can see on the right-hand side here, we have more than $600 million in our 10-year CIP just to work for on the Potomac Interceptor. And of those $600 million, the plan is to spend $350 million over the next year. As you can see, we have 3 projects, PI01, PI02, and PI03. The PI01, which is the top one, 10,000 linear foot. And as you can see in the picture on the left-hand side, that's the project. Actually, we were ready to go to procurement. We issued the RFI on December 11, and we met with contractor between January 5th and January 16. And on January 19, unfortunately, a portion of that project that we were working on getting out, this is where the break happened. So that's the PI01. So that's why, when this happened, of course, we are in the middle of this emergency repair that we have out there. But what we did, because of the break, we looked at all, we CCTV'd that pipe, 2,000 feet of it. And what we're going to do, we're going to use this, we're going to use our presence in the site out there to take care of those 2,000 feet. Basically, we're going to deduct them from the 10,000 linear feet of the project that's going to continue as a regular CIP project. So that project is going to move forward in July 2026, but the 2,000 linear feet going to be done right now. And also what we did, we are walking now the entire 54-mile of the Potomac Interceptor from Dallas Airport all the way to the District of Columbia and Maryland border to look at areas where the pipe, there are drops on the pipe, because those are the area where we have, a concentration of, H2S that causes this corrosion, and check those pipes, do CCTV, check them, and see whether we should also include that one as part of the scope of the 2,000 feet I talked to you about that we need to repair right now while we are on site. So we were actively planning for this project, and unfortunately, just as we finished meeting with the contractor on the 19th, this break happened.
Thank you, Dr. Won. Madam Chair, our mission going forward is to clear the pipe, restore the flow back to the Potomac Interceptor. That is what it will take in order to eliminate the flows into the Potomac River. And then we'll be moving forward on the permanent repair, the environmental restoration efforts, as well as rehabilitation of the greater Potomac Interceptor in line with the 10-year program that Dr. Won talked about. I do want to thank members of the community who have been supportive of what we early in the project, there was a knock on the trailer door. We have an emergency trailer down there that's used for our crews and our work. There was a knock on the door. A gentleman introduced himself and said how much he loved the river. And he saw the lights on overnight for several days and brought out a giant 5-gallon pot of chili and fed the workers. And we very much appreciated the support from that gentleman as well as the community. We will continue to work through the challenges that we face. Here's a picture of some of the wipes. We will work through the boulder and the other challenges that come to us. It's very difficult work. Appreciate the men and women of DC Water as well as our contracting partners who have been out there every day working through this. And we'll continue to be transparent as we move forward. Madam Chair, David Gaddis is online and he will provide a statement with your permission.
Sure. Yes, I was going to recognize him. Thank you, Matt. And before we take questions, let's hear from David Gaddis, who's the CEO and General Manager of DC Water. Thank you, Mr. Gaddis, for joining us.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry. I think I was on mute. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. Thank you.
And
thank you, Madam Chair.
Can I ask, well, okay. All right. Go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
No, I'm sorry. Go. Did you have
I was going to say we could take down we could stop sharing so we can see you.
I'm trying, Madam Chair. All right.
No, I think we have to do it on our end.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Gaddis.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I appreciate this opportunity for us at DC Water to give you this briefing and give you an update on this very, very important project. It's unfortunate that this break occurred, and so as a result of that, though, we have put in a lot of work, and the team has done a great job thus far in trying to execute this repair. You know, this briefing is important not only to us, but it's important that we give you the facts and what's going on. And I want to underscore that DC Water continues to deliver clean, safe drinking water and meets the regulatory standards and those sort of things. And through our distribution system, and water remains one of our highest priorities on a day-to-day basis. The Interceptor event does not change that the fundamental facts of our commitment is treating wastewater. And we have done that. We continue to do that. And we have the highest standards in the front of us that we've set, and that also the EPA sets. We've had great meetings with EPA in coming out over the past couple of days. They will continue to be out on site and working with us, along with the Maryland individuals, and also DC individuals will be there as well, MDE and also DOEE and others. So a lot of jurisdictions have a lot of interest in what we're doing, and so we're going to make sure that we do the right thing. Protecting the Potomac River is not the responsibility, we feel, of just one organization. It is a shared obligation, and we take that shared obligation very, very serious. And it happens through, as Matt was talking earlier in his presentation, through collaboration and transparency and sustained investment as well in the Potomac. And I am confident that we can strengthen both the health and also in the river, and also the trust of the communities that we serve. So I just wanted to pop on real quick and tell you thank you very much for this opportunity. I think Matt and Wusa, Dr. Wan gave you a great presentation, and we will answer any questions that you may have now. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Gaddis. So with that, I'm going to ask, are there any questions for this panel? Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I think it's very helpful. I got a couple questions. One, in one of your slides, it looks like permanent repair is going to take 9 months. Is that true? I'm not sure if Matt or
you want to take that one?
That's our projection, sir. There's a couple things that we want to do. The first thing is the first priority is get the flow back in the Potomac Interceptor.
Right.
And we believe that'll happen in the 4 to 6 week time frame.
Yeah.
We did have a planned project downstream of the current location. We had recently completed what we call slip lining, so it's inserting a pipe inside of the existing pipe upstream at an area. That method was planned to be used downstream of the current location, and so we are looking at what additional work we can do while we're mobilized at the site and have entry into the pipe. But we want to do as much as we can while we're there.
Thank you. So how much flow is going into the river now? Estimated.
Thank you for the question. The estimate right now is 243 million gallons
Per day?
No, sir. In total.
You mean total, in total, but I'm saying per day. Do you have an idea?
Sure. I mean, it varied over time. At the early part, and before we put in the bypass system, we estimate that it was in the neighborhood of 40 million gallons a day.
Right.
It was brought down after the pumps were brought on place to about 5 million gallons. We have not had an overflow into the river that I'm aware of since Sunday. We do have some capacity on site to be able to capture minor overflows on site and then bring the flow back into the Potomac Interceptor. You may have heard about Super Bowl Sunday. There were a lot of people home, and we had increased flows into the pipe, and then there were two pumps down because there were wipes in them, and so we did have several 100,000 gallons of flow that reached the Potomac River on Sunday. But since we've had even the first set of pumps up, the volumes reaching the Potomac River have been substantially reduced.
Thank you.
But today there's no flows going into there on a consistent basis.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just incidental flows. When we have those flows that come out of the existing system, we have to report it to the regulatory agencies, but that does not mean it reached the river. So everything that comes out of the pipe, we're going to have to report it, even if it's gallons.
All right, thank you. And it looks to me like your temporary channel is made out of a series of coffin boxes. Is that what I'm seeing?
The
flumes?
Yeah, the temporary channel you've put in to redirect it, it looks like a series of coffin boxes put together. Is that what it is? I mean, I'm just curious as to how tight they are. It looked like a series of coffin boxes put together.
The first two, Matt, can I take it?
Please, yeah.
Yeah, the first two, as Matt showed in his presentation, the 60-inch and the 48-inch, those are made out of trench boxes. As Matt stated, we were in a hurry to get to redirect that flows going to the river back to the Potomac Interceptor. But the third one that what we are building right now is going to be watertight. We're going to put in a geopolymer so we can hit the 100 million gallon day.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking when I saw the trench boxes that they're not watertight when they're put together, and so I was just curious about what was leaking out there, but I see you put in a more watertight version beyond those.
But even those one with the trench boxes, even if it leaks inside the CNO canal. It's not going to the river.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I recall early in I recall early in my engineering career, I was with an engineering firm to help to separate Washington, D.C.'s combined water and sewer systems. Does D.C. still have combined water and sewer systems as they input that effluent and water to Blue Plains? And was that a contributing factor? Second thing is, with the new pipes, will the new pipes that you're constructing after manhole number 18, will that have some type of detection strips on it, which were not available in the 60s?
Detection what? I didn't hear the second.
Detection strips or detection devices on the line to detect when there's a leak, so that it doesn't collapse all of a sudden. You can detect it along the pipe system.
So the first question, the combined sewer overflows in the District of Columbia, separate or combined, we have in the District of Columbia, we have both combined and separate sewer system. The combined is the old area. And that area, actually the Clean Rivers Project is in charge of, capturing those CSOs and taking them to Blue Plain. Just for the Anacostia River, since we put it in operation in 2018, we captured more than 20 billion of combined sewer overflow and then conveyed them to Blue Plains to be treated before discharge to the river, and more than 11,000 tons of trash. That's just for Anacostia. And for the Potomac, right now we are building the Potomac Tunnel. That's 5.5 miles from Joint Base, Anacostia Boiling, all the way to Georgetown. And once that tunnel is complete, we will be able to capture 93% of the combined sewer that were supposed to go to the Potomac River, put them in a tunnel and take them to Blue Plain to be discharged. At this stage today, because before the beginning of the clean rivers, we had more than 1 billion gallons in an average year going to the Potomac. Right now, at this stage where we are, because we're still building the tunnel, we're capturing 40% of that. That means more than 600 million still going to the river every time it rains and the system is overwhelmed. That's what is going on right now in the river. So, and what was the other question? I'm sorry, I forgot.
With the new piping system, will there be some detection devices along the new pipe to detect when there's a leak, which was a technology that was not available in the 60s when this pipe was originally built, detection system for leaks?
Eventually,
like to have on water lines.
Yeah, eventually what we're going to be doing, everything what we learned based on this unfortunate event, we're going to make sure we use it. So next time we're going to be more prepared, and not only based on our emergency response plan, but also based on the contingencies. Yes, we're going to put there we're going to put there a system basically to make sure that these things will not happen without us knowing. But just to add before I move, we have a robust condition assessment system. We inspect these pipes. As of today, 90% of the Potomac interceptor was inspected in the last 6 years. That means 90% of the pipe, at least we had one iteration of inspection. So this is the information what we use to develop our risk-based approach for our CIP, because we look at our pipe and then their condition, then we run our risk model, we prioritize, and that's how we come up with our CIP.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have Madam Chair, may I have like 2 or 3 questions? Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So I heard the gentleman speak about when the pipe 90% has been inspected, but when specifically was this portion of the pipe last inspected? By who and by what means was it inspected?
This pipe was inspected specifically July 2021. We have our program manager, who is a consultant working with us. They are the one who inspected that pipe.
Okay, and when, by what means? How were they inspecting it?
CCTV. We do CCTV. We get there and we do CCTV and we pull it out, and then our inspector analyze it, and they, for each section what the CCTV went through, they assign a NASCO score. NASCO score, it's between 1 to 5. 1 means very good, 5 means critical.
Okay, and then my last question is, I have Back River wastewater treatment plants. So I'm relatively familiar with surge events. What happens if we have a big surge event while this repair is still going on? We got a lot of snow, for instance, sitting on the ground. What if we have a big, very large spring storm? What then? What happens? Are you confident that this bypass will hold? What could potentially be released into the river at that point if we have a large surge event?
No, but if we have a large surge event, as Mr. Brown said in his presentation, so right now our system can capture up to 60 million gallons a day. By adding the third flume and these extra pump that we're going to be putting at our pit that we are, excavating right now, in that pit, we're going to be having 5 pumps. Those 5 pumps each pump is 13 million gallons a day. And also what we're going to be doing is the pump what we have now at manhole 18, we have there 2 pumps, one 13 million gallon a day and the other one 7 million gallon a day. We're going to move them to where we have the pit. Those guys are going to be spare pump. depend on, it will depend on the event, basically, how much flow is coming on us. Just to go back to the question that was asked regarding, the combined sewer overflows, we build tunnel, we capture this, but sometimes you're just going to have an event you cannot everything capture. It's going to spill.
Sure, no, and I appreciate that, and that's certainly fair. But do I hear that? Is it 60 million is what we could handle maximum, or is it a larger number than that? So I'm just trying to wrap my head around the number, the maximum amount that it could handle if there was a big surge. We have big surges in the Back River system that are well beyond 60 million. So I'm just trying to understand what is the maximum amount that we could handle if we had a big spring storm or something like that.
We have 100 MGD.
Yeah.
That's what we
180 million?
designed it for, 100 million gallon day.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Wong, can you tell us if you can treat the sewage with blue light or some other kind of method to avoid contamination?
I'm not going to go into the treatment because that's not really my specialty. So all what I know is that because, when we capture those flow, those sewage, we take them to blue plains to be treated before discharge to the river. All what I know, the effluent coming out of the blue plains is better than the water what we have in the river currently on the Potomac.
Thank you.
No problem.
It's muted. Chair Corbin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of things. First, I should have acknowledged my District 16 colleagues who were also here. Delegate Wallach was here, Delegate Warman's office, Senator Love's office, obviously their area as well. But two questions. One, I feel like I just missed something about what actually caused the breach, if we know succinctly and specifically, like what actually caused this, because I think some people are concerned that it could happen again or happen somewhere else along the interceptor, and I just think I missed that. And my second question, if I may, Madam Chair, is I'm just trying to understand, and this will also be a question for the Maryland Department of the Environment, a little bit more about the testing going forward. I greatly appreciate the testing that's being done. I'm very happy to see that downstream, it looks like the levels are much lower. I also think some of that may be due to how frozen the river has been. And I also understand that this can settle and then get stirred up in the future. And so I just want to understand what the ongoing testing is going to be over an extended period of time, especially in places where people recreate, like Fletcher's Cove, where I take my kids, or down by National Harbor, where people might throw a fishing line in. And obviously we have some commercial fisheries, plus the Little Falls pumping station, where there could be times when water is needed from there. So just trying to understand what actually caused this, and then the long-term testing, not just the testing while you're working over the next 9 months.
Chair, if I may, the break was an unanticipated issue. The priority has been to return the flow back to the Potomac interceptors we talked about. The final causation will be determined after we excavate into the failure location. As Dr. Wone mentioned, this is an area that where there may have been H2S gas that promotes corrosion of the pipe, but all of that we'll look into as soon as we're able to reach the pipe after we're able to stop the flow. I can speak a little bit about the testing. We thought it was important to start testing and then publish the results. We're going to continue that daily, at least for some period of time. We've been working with MDE, the District Department of Energy and Environment, and we'll determine what that testing looks like going forward. But for right now, we're doing the daily testing. And I think your next panel may be able to provide better information with regards to your other questions, if that's all right.
Sure. Chair Corbin, did you have a follow-up, or you good? Good. Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions for this panel before we move to our next panel? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, gentlemen, from DC Water to come here, Mr. Gaddis and his crew. And we really appreciate your being here and explaining this to us. As you can imagine, we're all very, very concerned, as I know you are, about this event. Let me just mention before we go to the next panel that we did invite the Environmental Protection Agency to join us on this call, and they responded that they didn't think they had anything to offer and refused to join us. So if you have a question about that, that's why they're not here. But we do have the Maryland Department of the Environment, we have Lee Curry and Adam Ortiz. So gentlemen, I'll let you take it over, whoever we start with here. And if you need to share your screen, please give us a shout out and we'll make that happen. You got it. Good.
Well, thank you so much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Good afternoon. Chair Corman, great to hear your voice, and we appreciate your interest and engagement with us on this issue, and we'll continue to remain engaged with you in the committee going forward. As you said at the top, Madam Chair, this is a utility that's based in the District of Columbia, and as so, EPA is the principal regulator of this and overseeing the cleanup. So they're in charge of the enforcement and the compliance. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a role. MDE in the state does have a critical role, and we're going to describe that. And then my colleague Lee Curry is going to go in a little bit more detail about our actions to date, the findings from our monitoring, and then also looking ahead. And as I said, we're here to remain a resource and in communication with all of you and all the stakeholders in the district and in District 16. So so there's a handful of things that are top priority. So from day one, and I want to thank our colleagues at DC Water, we've been in coordination with them from day one. We've been on site from day one, and we've had robust communication. So I'm grateful to General Manager Gaddis and COO Matt Brown for their engagement. They've been working hard and they've been working around the clock and have answered all of our questions and have provided us complete access to the site. So our roles are to conduct frequent inspections of the site and related cleanup efforts, looking ahead to review and approve restoration plans involving the canal and all the area, including reconnecting the pipe in time. Importantly, to protect Maryland's drinking water intakes, and we can talk a little bit more detail, but the short version is that they are not affected. Next, to protect shellfish harvesting areas, and there is an area down by the 301 bridge in Charles County that we did shut down immediately out of an abundance of caution, and Lee Curry will talk a little bit more about that. And to conduct, and to Chair Corman's concern, ongoing water quality sampling and testing. And we do have results that we're going to share with the committee in this presentation. So those are the formal roles that we have, but informally, it's also important, you know, as the general manager said, that the Potomac River is everybody's responsibility and we need to work together. So we do see as stewards of the state environment here at MDE that we have an important communication and coordination role to make sure that folks are at the table and engaged in solving these problems and issues as they come up together. So we'll continue to do that with our federal partners, with regional entities, with the utilities, and with all of you in the legislature and the people that you represent. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Lee Curry. Lee, as many of you know, is the director of our Water and Science Administration. They've been running point on this issue. Their team, as I mentioned, has been on site and monitoring and engaged every single day since the breach occurred. So Lee, I'll hand it off to you to provide a little more detailed color for the members of the committee.
Sure. Thank you, Adam, and good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Lee Curry, Director of the Water and Science Administration. And please tell me, because I can't see if I'm sharing, I assume you have a PowerPoint in front of you.
Yes, we do.
Great, thank you. And did the slide change?
It did.
Perfect. Okay, so we got that working. As Adam had mentioned, he provided an incident overview, and I think you received some of this from what DC Water talked about. But know that from 10 o'clock, January 19th, when we received the call from DC Water that there was an overflow, the next day we were on site. We've conducted 5 inspections overall, and we were on site today. We've been working closely with a variety of agencies, which I'll talk about just briefly. But this gives you a snapshot of just, you know, what's really happened in terms of the magnitude of the event. It is one of the largest in our regions. It is a signal that infrastructure, how important managing infrastructure, investing in infrastructure is. I'll talk through some of what's happened with respect to public health, water safety, and also the containment. And as Adam had mentioned, the Potomac River, which is interjurisdictional in nature with so many agencies and bordering multiple states, it really takes a variety of partners. So I just want to thank the partners that have been engaged in this. I know from, as I mentioned, the 19th, when we got our call, we were activated on the 20th on site. We were working with EPA over that weekend, coordinating with them. We were, I thank other agencies like the Maryland Department of Health and the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. We were on a call Saturday, just trying to offer support. DC Water was on the call with us. So this just provides some type of framework with respect to that. EPA does regulate DC Water and holds the consent decree. It's responsible for the consent decree for the pipe itself. This discharge was into Maryland waters. We were going to make sure that our Maryland waters are protected and restored where necessary. This gives you an impact at a glance, just looking at, and these are immediate impacts, not looking at longer term. Drinking water, we were fortunate that drinking water intakes were located upstream of the spill, so we'll put that as safe. Shellfish areas, about 50 miles downstream of the spill is the first shellfish area. Shellfish, as they filter water, can be susceptible to bacteria. We did computer models in-house and determined that there likely wasn't going to be any impacts there, but recognizing that there were no active leases and that recreational harvesting doesn't begin until March 31st, we issued a precautionary closure just for this one area. So that is still in effect right now. It's a 21-day closure. We haven't determined when we're going to lift that yet. I'll talk more about this, but we'll be on the water next week collecting bacteria samples, water samples, and testing them for bacteria. We were also on the water last week. I do want to mention, in terms of broader impacts and what I'm hearing from the industry, is that even though there are no closures downstream of the bridge, just because folks are familiar with the Potomac, there's a hesitancy to want oysters that are harvested from the Potomac River. So it's just a critical challenge that we're dealing with communication. We will have boats on the water next week. I'm hoping that once we collect that information, show the bacteria levels are very low there, that there's no impacts, that's going to help. From recreation, there's health advisories that are active in 3 counties, Montgomery, Prince George's, and Charles. Those decisions are made by the Department of Health and also the local health department with support from us. So we continue to work together. And then as far as containment, DC Water had mentioned the status, which is, I would flag it as partial and mostly. Most of the flow is diverted. Then there's occasional disruptions that occur if pumps go down or they get clogged for whatever reason. And from an overview of what MDE has done, it's been coordination, direction to DC Water, whether it was with respect to notification, putting signs out in and around their site. We've had good conversations with them. They've been very responsive. I appreciate that with daily coordination with them. As I mentioned, we have had 5 inspections where we go and look to see what are the impacts, what's the status of the containment. We recognize that containment's in about 3,000 feet of the C&O Canal, which has impacts. So we're also looking at and assessing the environmental damage to identify what needs to be fixed after this is fully contained and the pipe is fixed. As I mentioned, the shellfish protections are in place. There's ongoing monitoring. I also want to give a shout out and thanks to DC Department of Energy and Environment for coordinating a regional monitoring meeting to look at who is sampled where. That was very helpful. I will say that in the areas where we were trying to get access to, our boats were iced in. We were doing this during a snowstorm. So we were trying to get boats on our ramps. We actually reached out to DNR, their Natural Resources Police, to see if we can get on board with them. We were struggling to get access to the water to get samples in those larger water bodies. Ice is melted now. We were out yesterday. Again, we'll be out next week. We were out the week previously collecting water from a pier, poking holes through the ice, just trying to get some data. Long-term, I'm going to skip health coordination. We talked briefly about that. Long-term recovery, it's going to be reviewing, assessing, understanding what the plan is for dealing with the impacts, both where the discharge flowed over the land and the impacts there, the impacts in the canal itself, and any other impacts related to the river. So we can make sure that there is mitigation or remediation that takes place. Sampling results, I really thank DC Water. These are their results that they showed earlier. I want to include these because they worked their way down through DC. We looked at them from maybe a different lens. One thing I can say is that the health standard for E. coli, which is what was analyzed here, on average, it should be around 135. A single sample maximum shouldn't be over 230 about. and you're seeing very high levels at the site. Not surprising, given that when sewage was going in at its peak level was probably 3 to 4% of the river itself. As you work your way downstream, going from the site itself, you can see it moves down to National Harbor. And if you move left to right across the numbers, you see them decrease. If you look at the column on National Harbor, what that's telling us is bacteria levels at that location are very low. So that's good news. It's diluting, and we're not seeing impacts down to that level, which we would expect not to see impacts in our shellfish harvesting areas, which our models predicted, but we want data to confirm that. So I just wanted to talk through what it's telling us and how we're using this information. Now, what we're doing is, if you look on the picture in the center, that's what the river looked like when we were trying to collect samples from it and poking through the ice. It was challenging in certain areas. What we're doing moving forward is, if you look on the left, we're collecting samples upstream. These will be weekly water samples upstream of where the break was, right at the DC line. There's an area where we know kayakers go, just upstream of that. We're going to collect samples there. We're going to go to National Harbor, and then we're going to collect a few samples downstream. Our commitment is to do this on a weekly basis, so we have our own information to look at what are the changes, what are the current impacts along the river itself, and then we want to support the local health departments in supporting their decisions with respect to how they lift any advisories. The map on the right-hand side that shows the striped area, that's the area that we closed, and all those orange dots along the bottom, that's where we collect data to determine whether we can have shellfish areas open or closed. So all those bigger blue areas downstream, they're all open for harvesting. That dashed area is the one that's currently closed. We only collected the one sample because we couldn't get access to it. But again, we were out there yesterday, collected samples in that location. They were processed in the lab. We should have results tomorrow and present them next week. Ongoing and long-term, it's going to be coordination with the federal government, both EPA, National Capital Park and Planning, in terms of the recovery work that's going to be needed, and the restoration plans. A restoration plan, we were on site today. There's a restoration plan that should come to us next week. We'll be looking at that, understanding did it capture everything that we think is needed, and how can data and science inform that. We will be looking to reopen the closed shellfish harvesting area, that precautionary closure, using data that we collect, and we will provide support to the health department for lifting advisories. Messaging and impacts is critical. As I mentioned, when we collect our data, have our results for next week for the shellfish harvesting area. I want to make it clear, if the results come back and there's low or no detect levels of bacteria, that those areas are safe. I think it's important to get the right messaging, using data to show where the impacts are, so we can communicate that effectively, and people that don't need to be impacted, such as the shellfish industry, are not. And then we'll have regulatory oversight on the restoration of the affected resources. We've engaged ourselves, and we're working closely with EPA. Finally, our enforcement role, given that this was a discharge to waters that we regulate and manage and have a responsibility for. Again, we're coordinating. As I mentioned, we'll look at a restoration plan, determine what is needed, whether it's approvable, and what actions are needed. And then we're going to continue to monitor not only the river, but the actions that are taken by DC Water, and work closely with EPA and the federal government to make sure this is resolved effectively. With that, I know that was pretty quick, but I wanted you to have these reference slides for yourself also. But we are happy to answer any questions. And I think we also have the health department here online.
Yes, sir, we do. We have Megan Lynch from the health department, and if there are questions for her, she's also available. I see Delegate Healy, and thank you for the presentation, Mr. Curry and Mr. Ortiz. I see that Delegate Healy has her hand up, but I have a question before we move to Delegate Healy. And this is kind of following up on a question that the chairman raised that I don't think was really addressed, which is, I think we've heard that the fact that the river was frozen, and that the water obviously isn't moving as it would. I think the question is, do we anticipate that the contamination may get worse when the river thaws?
I can answer quickly, and then I'll defer to Lee,
Okay,
who's
sure.
a little bit closer to with the science team. I think that is a very real and acute concern, and I know our friends and colleagues from Potomac River Keeper will also opine on that. We're pleased at the moment with what we're seeing and bacteria coming down, but this is not over. The MDE will remain engaged, will remain monitoring, and be coordinating with local health departments accordingly. So yeah, we do not want to be naive. We're certainly not out of the woods. But Lee, what would you like to add in anything from your science folks?
Yes. Yeah, I think will we see impacts possibly in the locations where we see high bacteria levels now. So I think we need to be, more, or I'd say precise in terms of where are the impacts. I don't think we'll see them downstream if I had to just make a guess based on the further downstream in the larger water bodies. But my concern would be, what has settled to the bottom near the overflow. And that's where we need to have some continued monitoring through the winter into the spring to better understand what's happening.
Thank you. Delegate Healy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you everyone for all this good information. I have a couple questions. What is, I represent Prince George's County, so I'm going to ask about the areas down National Harbor and the economic impact and on tourism. I understand I was not there down by the river, so I don't know if the unpleasant smells and all those things are affecting the people who are spending a lot of money to stay at National Harbor. And will it affect the economics of that place? Does anybody,
Well,
has anybody looked
perhaps-
at that question?
Yeah,
Has
I don't
anybody?
know. Yeah, Mr. Ortiz or Mr. Curry, if you want to address that, I would point out that perhaps the river keepers might have some more information on that. I don't know, but
Well,
anyway,
these
go
are.
ahead. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Go ahead.
Mr. Ortiz, go ahead.
Sure. I'll start. We're very encouraged with what we've been seeing so far. As you saw, DC Water has been monitoring on that site from right away, and we have as well. We're very encouraged by the levels being increasingly low. So I think, again, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. The thawing weather and the warming weather will have to be monitored, but I'm optimistic that it won't have much of an economic impact, if any at all.
Okay.
That's my conjecture.
Okay, I like that. I hope that's true. I hope that turns out to be the case. The other question has to do with you had this care for the protecting the shellfish, the oysters and so forth. The question I had was about the other kind of fish that are fished out of the Potomac River, especially like the blue catfish, which we're trying to get rid of and get people to eat. We probably don't want them to eat stuff that's been contaminated. So has anybody been looking at that?
We have not been looking at the catfish on the bottom. So that would accumulate over a long period of time. I think that's a good question for our fisheries folks. I appreciate you asking that, and I'll put that on the list of something we need to answer. I would also, just in terms of supporting and following up on Adam's question, which is, or a comment on economic impact, I think it's important for us to be precise. Again, when we say the Potomac is impacted or it's not, there are certain areas. And I think we need to be, like when I pointed to or showed the results near National Harbor, the results were very low. So I think it's important that we use that data and information to define where the impacts are and where the impacts are not.
I'm also concerned about people who fish in the river for their families, to feed their families, at low-income people who this is a source of nourishment for them. And I don't know whether they even know that they may be putting themselves at risk.
That's always a major concern. And advisories, fish advisories and consumption advisories are something that the jurisdictions, the local and the District of Columbia, are always in communication on. So we will remain monitoring, we'll remain to keep those advisories up to date.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Healy. Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you again. Thank you, Mr. Ortiz and Lee Curry, for your presentation. It's very helpful. And I appreciate Delegate Healy's question about the finfish, the catfish especially, as you know, are bottom feeders. And, you know, that I know that some of the larger blue cats, especially there's some question in their bellies texture, you know, what they have eaten and the effects it has on them. So I'm glad to hear that you're going to have fisheries involved in this. But my question is really, and you talked about, you know, you felt like you may be able to open the river back up, but it's been a very poor oyster season as overall the entire year. But a lot of boats have worked in the Potomac this whole oyster season, more so than normal. And so I'm just curious as to what kind of narrative you're going to put out there from a safety standpoint, because, you know, once an event like this occurs, it turns people off quick. You know, they're going to start asking about, you know, where these come from. They already do that, and rightfully so. But I mean, how robust is the narrative going to be to the public safety side of it, as far as eating finfish and shellfish? Is that something MDE is going to be active in?
Delegate, thank you. Thank you for your question. You always have great questions, and this is another really good one. We have to start with the science and what the data is telling us and what the health impacts are. So we're going to remain transparent on our findings. We're going to be working with fisheries. We're going to be working with DNR. We're going to be working with health officers to make sure that we're putting forth the truthful narrative. And if there is confidence that impacts are minimal, or that there's reduced impacts to public health, we want to make sure that we communicate that as well. If there's evidence to the contrary, we have to be transparent about that. But communicating truthfully and often, because different people get their sources of information from different places and different stakeholders, that's a coordination role that, you know, we're happy to play with others. And you and I talk a lot, and I'm happy to also get your suggestions on how we get the word out to the watermen and fishing community.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's really important that we get the right narrative, you know, because as you know, things can go in many different directions, and, you know, you hear all kinds of things. And this is, I remember the Keystone issue way back in the 70s, and it was, you know, it had people scared to death, you know, buying fish. And I just don't want to see that be a repeat of that. So I appreciate it. I'll be talking with you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Jacobs. Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is probably for Mr. Ortiz. Mr. Ortiz, is there, and you may have already said this and I might have missed it, and I apologize if you did. Is there a place where the public can sign up to BO and say an email or a text notification if there was a surge event or something like that to occur in the future, where they can get kind of real-time data that, hey, it's not safe to be you know, around the canal or in the river at this time? Is there a way for the public to do that?
Yeah, DC Water at the moment, they're running point on communications because they're the front line in doing so. So we're happy to transmit that information to any stakeholders or to you, Delegate. Lee, we have, you know, various forms of communication. As you know, Back River is an important one that we've been working with folks in Essex and Dundalk on getting information out. Lee, is there anything that you'd like to add, or anything you want to put into the mix for the delegate?
We do have overflow information that is reported back to us. I think if we can get DC Water to report that information out and we do the same thing, we can, you know, we can help improve our communication. What immediately comes to mind is we're always better when we set up a website that's dedicated to providing information, you know, a common point. So I would commit to do that.
I love that idea. I know Back River has that. I would also like to ask, is there a thought about doing similar to what Back River has? There is a light that gets turned on, as you all are well aware, that when there's an overflow event, for anyone that is around the river, on the river there, the light comes on. There's a physical, you know, thing that says, hey, there's a problem here. Don't get close to this area. Is there any talk about having something like that for anyone that may be, you know, in the Potomac River area there, that someone can see? You know, maybe they're not checking their phone or whatever, but that is there then to let them know that something is amiss in that area.
Yeah, I like that suggestion. Yeah, and are you thinking, Delegate, on that immediate site in that Cabin John area where the work is ongoing?
Yes, that's what I would suggest. That's the Back River has something like that
Right.
in the area where an effluent pipe is, where if there's a surge event or something like that, where it would potentially occur. Obviously, it goes out from there, but the light is there at the effluent pipe on the Back River, and it lets any boaters or anyone else that's recreating in the area know, even if they're not checking their phone or whatever, that hey, like this is not the place to be right now.
Yeah, that there's a lot of chatter and a lot of interest in that light, as you and I know, and
Yes,
and provided an educational opportunity as well as accountability for the operators. So it's been very effective there to the Back River community. So I'm happy to take that conversation with our colleagues at DC Water and see if something similar is feasible for the site in Montgomery County.
Yeah, that would be great, at least during this period of time when the renovation is underway. I mean, I think Delegate Naraki, I think this is not an area like the backwater area like you're talking about. This isn't, I mean, this is a real unusual event to happen in this area.
That's right, Madam Chair. I don't anticipate this is going to be forever, but
Right.
for the next 9 months, there could be
Right.
opportunities for something to occur there.
Right. Good suggestion. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for this panel? All right, seeing none, thank you so much, Mr. Ortiz and Mr. Curry, for staying on top of this and trying to help keep us safe and keep our environment safe and keep our wildlife in the bay and our aqua life safe. Finally, our final panel is on the environmental and health impacts of this event. We have Dean, and I'm going to mispronounce your name, Dean. Nayaks, thank you. Betsy Nichols, and they're both from the Potomac Riverkeeper Network. And then we also have Rachel Rosenberg Goldstein, who is an assistant professor at the University of Maryland School of Public Health. And as I mentioned earlier, for questions, if need be, we also have Megan Lynch from the Maryland Department of Health. So take it away. I guess, Dean, are you going first?
Betsy's Nicholas, our president's going to start, but if you could allow me to share my presentation and then she can start. Thank you.
Sure.
Feel free to work on that in the background, Dean.
Okay.
So Betsy Nicholas, President, Potomac Riverkeeper Network. I'm used to the 3 minutes in these discussions, so I'm going to try and stick to that and make sure that Dean and Dr. Rachel can get more of the questions on the details. But I wanted to kind of bring this a little bit bigger picture to what we are often talking about in committee meetings, the Chesapeake Bay. So our estimate, and this is an estimate, but of the roughly 250 to 275 million gallons that's spilled is, first of all, largest spill anywhere in the country in decades. And roughly 75,000 pounds of nitrogen would be the new load that came out of this spill, which is a load bigger than all but the 10 largest wastewater treatment plants in the state of Maryland. So essentially, it's like having a great big major wastewater treatment plant loading into the bay. And part of the reason that this is particularly important in that bigger context of the Chesapeake Bay is that these spills are not accounted for when we look at the modeling, the watershed implementation plans, or anything else. So when asking the question, why aren't we making the progress we had hoped for? Because these happen a lot. Back River, Patapsco, Valley Proteins, Metcom, all of these in the last 5-6 years. And then this one, bigger than all of them, is going to have a long-term impact on the health of the river and the Chesapeake Bay. A couple just really quick things before I hand it over to Dean. DC Water, we recognize that you've been communicating a lot, that you had people on the site, and we know how awful it was out there because our team was out there as well. I would just ask that you start using the term partial containment instead of containment, because we have had hundreds, if not thousands, of people contacting us believing that there was no discharge that ever reached the Potomac River. That's how it was understood or misunderstood in your communications. And so there are a lot of people who weren't getting the information that they needed to protect themselves and stay healthy. Marilyn, we want to thank you for getting those health advisories out. We finally just got one from DC today. You know, better late than never, I guess, on that. And we finally got something from the state of Virginia as well. But our priority at this time is making sure that our communities are safe and they're not putting themselves at risk unnecessarily. But we also need to think about this bigger picture of what these spills do to water quality for the entire region and how we can better plan and prepare for that to avoid these kinds of disasters. I'm handing it over to Dean.
Sure. Thank you, Betsy. Madam Chair and everybody, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity today. And I'm just going to give kind of a slight, the different perspective on this, but, you know, we've talked about the spill itself, when it started. I just want to say that basically, from my perspective, and I think a lot of others, that it was being reported in the media that this was largely being contained in the C&O Canal. And we obviously respect all the hard work that crews have been doing. But it wasn't until Tuesday that I started getting a lot of calls from people living there saying, hey, all of this sewage is going in the river. And so I was out there Wednesday. And when I went out there, it was really shocking to see. There was already fish kills reported. And we got out there. And by day 3 already, we're looking at roughly, 120 million gallons of sewage and counting, and with no end in sight, right? And so, again, media's continue to report that it's mostly being contained or working to be contained within the C&O Canal, and hence Betsy's comment, right? So we went back out there, by day 5, and roughly now we're upwards of 200 million gallons. And just having done this work for 25 years, I already knew that this was quickly becoming one of the larger spills, if not the largest sewage spill in U.S. history, and still not one drop was contained in the C&O Canal. And keep in mind, this storm was coming, right? The media was reporting on this massive storm that was coming in on Saturday evening. And we knew that, despite all the best efforts, this sewage spill was going to continue, and that a lot of media and a lot of attention was going to start shifting over toward the storm itself in response to the storm, which is totally understandable. But we went out there and did some of our first sampling. And I'm going to let, Rachel with University of Maryland talk more about the sampling. But you can see this is a satellite image. For literally satellite images, we're able to pick up the impact of this sewage spill, at least in the upper section of this river. And even on January 24th, you can still see this big plume that goes all the way down Little Falls into DC waters, right? So, we're just doing the best we can as we're the crews out there working. And it, as DC Water mentioned, that it was starting to be contained in the C&O Canal, finally day 6, right? And that was the evening that the storm was coming in. And so, basically this spill just had continued releases that were ongoing. And I think, again, the perception was, even after that point, it was being contained within the C&O Canal. And we started, these signs were put up, and we started getting very concerned that there wasn't a response from Department of Public Health in DC. This was all DC Water putting out the narrative about, staying away from the river, but also not providing any real clear information. I think it's really important to note that it wasn't until January 29th, 5 days after they actually had partial containment, that they then declared that this was fully contained within the C&O Canal, right? And I think, again, that created a public perception and confusion, because there was additional releases that occurred after that. We continued to sample on January 28th, February 3rd. We were out there just this past week, yesterday on Thursday. And it wasn't until day 16 that DC Water then was forced to acknowledge additional sewage releases when we found out about the rocks in the broken interceptor pipe, that there would be 4 to 6 weeks delays. But again, they reported that E. coli data only shows slight increases from these additional releases. Our data from January 28th through February 3rd, our February 3rd data showed a 4,000 the levels were 4,000 times higher than EPA standard for safe recreational use. That is slight. That is not safe. And so they're saying words like slight, but not releasing their data to the public, really, and really creating these misperceptions about what's happening within the river itself. February 5th, we released our E. coli data. University of Maryland released their data. Rachel's going to talk about that. And it really showed some pretty alarming levels, not only of E. coli, but bacteria and pathogens that were found at the site as well as downstream. And then again, on February 6th, DC Water, Friday evening before Super Bowl Sunday, basically claims that there was about 243 million gallons released and that the river meets EPA standards for safe recreational use, only to have on February 10th, they put out another press release showing that Super Bowl Sunday, there was a major release. They didn't define what that release was, but it wasn't until reporters pressed them that it was like 600,000 gallons. That spill in and of itself, which just happened last Sunday, was a really significant spill. And they had to admit that they had reported inaccurate E. coli data. Thankfully, Montgomery County did issue recreational use advisories, but it took 25 days for DC to issue a public health advisory. They still, even in their own presentation today, which only went through, if you look at their timeline, to February 6th, they still stick with this number of 243 million gallons, even though there's been additional and ongoing releases. One as recently as Sunday of 600,000. That's a lot of sewage. So I think they still need to revise their number. We've been really frustrated personally by the reporting information. And the reason being is that people are contacting our office, literally, as Betsy mentioned, on a daily basis. Last week, there was DC firefighters that were putting themselves at harm's risk and going into the river and practicing drills in the ice. And they're contacting us and asking us if the river's safe. And at that point, there had been no public recreational use advisory issued. We've talked to swift boat rescue people in Montgomery County. There was 2 polar bear plunges planned. There was all these, people, like we just got an email today from people asking us who are doing scuba divers that are doing repairs in DC waters, asking, and quite frankly, none of them are trusting the information that they're getting from DC Water, because DC Water has made misstatements, miscalculations, reporting errors, and tried to kind of squash the public's concern on this. And so we appreciate the work they're doing to fix the Potomac Interceptor pipe as the crews, but they have continued to try and stay in this public health arena. And to me, it's been completely unacceptable that they are continuing to put out information about public health. They are not a public health agency. They should not be doing this. And so thankfully, this advisory was issued, but they keep making statements like, we want to be transparent. We've asked DC Water for their internal SCADA monitoring data, SCADA, internal monitoring data that could show the flow when the actual releases occurred, how much was actually being released. Because, obviously that pipe carried 60 million gallons a day. They estimated about 40 million gallons a day was going into the river. We want to know where that additional 20 million gallons a day went, right? So there's a lot of unanswered questions. I don't think they've been transparent. We've tried to get meetings with DC DOE a week and a half ago already. We've not even heard back from anybody about a meeting with DC DOE. So we've been really concerned. And I will say, they mentioned in their presentation the impacted areas, and they went as far as Swanson Island, which is right where the area of impact is. And I don't think anybody's really taking into account what the long-term repercussions are. I can tell you right now, the blue cat fisheries that y'all have been asking about is closed. They are not taking any blue cats. They pull about 3.4 million pounds of blue cats out of this river every year, an invasive species, and that fishery has basically been shut down. Nobody's going to eat these blue cats. And I'm going down Saturday to meet with watermen, and the blue cat fishermen are really concerned, and most of them are from Quantico Creek up to the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. And then there's obviously the oyster. People are pulling oysters out of the river, downriver. I just think it's really important to understand we're getting messages every day from people saying, hey, I'm not letting my kid row crew this year. And so I think the only way, that some of the statements have been made, but like Adam Ortiz and others, that, we need to do daily monitoring, right? I think we need to do daily monitoring, but that needs to continue. If we're going to restore the public's faith and confidence in using the river again, people rowing crew, people out there swimming, all the sailing, clubs that are out there, that long-term monitoring needs to happen and continue throughout the summer. But then there needs to be long-term monitoring downriver. And, so while the data is really important, I think there also you need to understand there's a perception issue. There is the perception that this river, this is one of the largest sewage spills, if not the largest sewage spill in United States history. The perception is really bad for the river. And when you look at like the BP oil spill, right, it took literally advertisement and stuff to bring people back down to go down and start, eating shellfish out of the Gulf of Mexico again. I just really, I don't think we're thinking how big of an impact this is going to have over the entire summer for communities like Colonial Beach. That is a beachfront community, and that people are going to swim in this river. Are they going to be comfortable? I think there needs to be daily monitoring at the DC level. I think there needs to be restoration efforts that need to happen. Some of the sediments and impacts upriver that were discussed by MDE, I think are really important. And I just say, as a river user, I'm really sad. That's one of my favorite stretches of river. I've swam right where that discharge has happened and rafted down to that spot. And I can tell you, I'm probably not going to take out at that location. I'm very uncomfortable about what might be in the sediments downriver. There's Sycamore Island Club, a whole community of people that swim there. They may lose an entire summer of swimming there. So I don't think we're really talking about what those long-term impacts potentially look like. And so I want to save some time for Rachel and Maryland, University of Maryland, to kind of go over the public health data, and then we'll take questions after that. But thank you for the time and opportunity. And I've stopped sharing.
Rachel?
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. All right. Okay, so again, thank you for having me today. My name is Rachel Rosenberg Goldstein. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Maryland in the School of Public Health in the Department of Global, Environmental, and Occupational Health. My work focuses on microbial water quality, so looking at bacteria that are in different types of water. I've done research on sewage and wastewater, and specifically antibiotic-resistant bacteria in wastewater for over 10 years. So what we were hoping to do here is to just understand what the water quality was at the site of the Potomac River that was impacted by the sewage, and then also downstream, so that we could understand what the public health risks possibly were. So our team collected samples starting on January 21st. On that date, we only collected samples from near Lock 10, the site nearest to where the sewage spill happened. With the Potomac River Keepers, we've also been collecting samples weekly since that time, so January 28th, February 3rd, and February 12th. I wanted to give everyone an idea about what we've been collecting data on and testing in our lab. So we are looking at E. coli. Here we are looking at concentrations similar to the data that you've already seen. Just a little background that E. coli is a fecal indicator bacteria. So it tells us that there are feces in the water, which makes sense in this case. And it also indicates that there could be actual pathogens or disease-causing microorganisms. So what my lab focuses on most is a specific pathogen, Staphylococcus aureus, which is an opportunistic pathogen. That means that 20 to 30% of the population already has Staph aureus in their bodies, but it can also cause infections, and it can cause a range of infections, including skin and soft tissue infections, also bloodstream infections. For this bacteria, we're only looking at the presence or absence of Staph aureus. And I did just want to mention, I know it's been raised multiple times already today about concerns about what the freezing temperatures might do, the ice. We know for this bacteria in particular that it can survive even when injured in freezing temperatures, and then it can become active again when temperatures rise. We also looked at the antibiotic resistant strain of Staph aureus, which is methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus, also called MRSA. And here again, we were only looking at presence absence. So these are our results to date. Again, we were out yesterday, but unfortunately we don't have the results ready just yet. So this is over time and also over space. Because some of the concentrations are so different from one another, I'm presenting this in a log scale. But you can see compared to this green line on the screen, this is that 410 most probable number per 100 milliliters water quality standard that's been referenced multiple times. So what you can see is that over time, there are multiple sites, both where the spill happened, but also downstream, where we've been measuring E. coli concentrations that exceed that water quality standard. And we were very encouraged to see that on February 3rd, less sites exceeded the standard, and we're also seeing concentrations decrease. But we also know that there's variability in terms of bacterial levels over time. And then for our Staph aureus results, so again, this is the pathogen that we've been looking at. We did identify Staph aureus both at the site of the spill at Lock 10, at the site where the sewage is actually entering the Potomac River as well. And then on January 28th, we actually also identified Staph aureus at Thompson Boat Launch, which is about 9 miles downriver. For our antibiotic resistant bacteria, we did identify MRSA at Lock 10, and it's not popping up, but also at Lock 10 at the Potomac River site on both January 28th and February 3rd. So I did want to acknowledge the hard work of both the Potomac River keepers, my students, my team who's been working hard. I think the big takeaway here is that there's a lot of dynamics in terms of the changing temperature, the changing season, the snow melt. It's really important. I'm thrilled to hear that there's talk about continued monitoring. We really want there to be continued monitoring so we can understand what the water quality is over time. We are at the University of Maryland. Our goal is to protect public health. We would love to collaborate as this monitoring continues.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for this panel? Of course. Delegate Jacobs.
Well, I'm going to hit every panel, and I do appreciate everyone's comments today. I think they've been very insightful and very helpful. And I do have one. I thank the Betsy and Dean for their presentation. But Rachel, I do have one question because I am getting call. I have had calls from people that are asking about Vibrio, and I don't know if the temperature makes a difference in that, but certainly we've had a Vibrio issue when in the waters of the Bay and in Potomac, ongoing, and I'm not sure how this impacts that, which is a scare in the public, I can tell you.
Yes, and thank you so much for that question. It's really important. I should have also noted that our lab is only looking at these two specific bacteria. So you're exactly right. There could be other bacteria in the water. There could very well be viruses, parasites. We only know what we're testing. For Vibrios, yes, like many bacteria, they prefer warmer temperatures, but we also know that Vibrios can go into something called a viable but not culturable state. That means that they could be present and you might not be able to detect them with certain methods in the lab, but they might still be viable. There are techniques to use genetic testing to determine if the genetic material for that bacteria is present. I think it's really important there's lots of great researchers in the state of Maryland to get more people involved so that we just know exactly what is in the water.
All right. And let me ask you, I've had people from Tall Timbers area downstream have been concerned about any contaminants down that way. Have you done any testing down that way?
No. So as far as we've gone is the National Harbor, and that's with our collaboration with the Potomac River Keepers. So Again, I think it's important to continue monitoring over time, but also over a larger space so that we just understand what the bacteria levels are even further downstream.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question is probably for Betsy and Dean. So unfortunately, I wish I could say that I was surprised by what you just said about transparency, but I'm not, given my experiences with the Back River wastewater treatment plant. It's been a heck of a battle for many years, so much so that there's an EPA consent decree now at that facility. I'm just curious what your thoughts are about going forward, about how to keep transparency going here, how to keep people honest. So that we know how to respond, because unfortunately, and I hope that's not going to be the case here, but my experience with my area has been the data is often withheld. You don't get the full data, all those sorts of things that would help us as policymakers be able to make more informed decisions.
I can add a little bit, and you can feel free to jump in, Dean. One thing that we would note is that there were a lot of conversations that were happening. We weren't included or invited to any of them. And I think that would help. I think having someone like Dr. Rachel, a public health professional, involved to understand and interpret the data would also be really helpful. And having, particularly, University of Maryland comes in independently there and is able to provide that information. I think having a bigger collaborative from the beginning who's part of the discussion would be really helpful to everyone involved, particularly community members who are asking questions. Dean, did you want to say something too?
Well, Adam Ortiz had mentioned that DC water is running point, and I think that's been a huge problem from the get-go. In DC government, which you have no control over, and I understand, this information should have been coming from a public health agency, or at least DC DOE, not DC Water, who created the spill and has a vested interest in, convincing the public that it's being contained, right? But from Maryland's perspective, I would like to see some of this information coming directly from the agencies themselves, even if it's sent through, because there were mistakes in reporting their own data from DC Water out to the public. And I think that's a huge problem. They continue to say things like minor overflows, which is 600,000 gallons of sewage, which would be a massive sewage spill in and of its own right if it wasn't for the 243 million gallons that we're already talking about. So it's just things like that I think are really, really important. And then, obviously the testing that's being done. And I think, DC Water is going to have to work in conjunction, if not pay funding for additional monitoring that University of Maryland should do, and MDE and Department of Health from Maryland should be doing downriver, because it's out of their jurisdiction.
And then one follow-up, Madam Chair. So this is a pet peeve of mine because it affects my community a lot, but I see a problem here for the Potomac. So we have a huge midge population in Eastern Baltimore County, and it has arrived because of our wastewater treatment facility and because of organic material. You obviously now have a ton of organic material now that is going to be in the river. Has anyone thought about that and what that could look like this spring and summer? I can tell you that it's absolutely atrocious in Eastern Baltimore County. Y'all probably haven't experienced it on that level yet, but it's not going to be very fun at National Harbor while someone's trying to sit out there and enjoy themselves when they're completely overrun by midges. So is anyone even thinking about what that could look like as the months warm up here?
Not yet, but I certainly think it is something that we need to look at. As Dean mentioned, right where this overflow happened is one of our favorite places on the river. If you ever get a chance to go right down from Great Falls through Mather Gorge, it's like going into Jurassic Park. It's just absolutely gorgeous area of the river, and that's sort of ground zero for this. So a lot of recreational opportunities, I think, are going to be lost. There are communities who live right along the river there, and I think they're all going to be impacted by this. We do know that Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, in collaboration with this whole grouping, including University of Maryland, are putting an air monitor on the site to see what kind of vapors are coming off of it, which doesn't specifically answer that. But Dean, do you want to talk about what your visual was yesterday?
I just think your point is really important because I know that in Baltimore, they've been doing these splash events. Leading up to the splash event, I saw a whole presentation in partnership with DOE about bringing swimming to DC here in 2027 for the Swimmable Cities Initiative. And one of the things that happened was sewage that was on the bottom of the bay there in the Baltimore Harbor was causing these blooms that were happening periodically. And basically they said it wasn't from sewage releases from Baltimore. Currently, it was from previous sewage spills that lay dormant on the bottom of the river that churned up and caused these blooms. And so we are thinking about that. That's why I'm thankful for having this opportunity. I don't think DC Water's thinking about that. I hope Maryland Department of Environment is thinking about that. And I am definitely concerned about it. And communities like Sycamore Island Club that live right down from this, I've already heard from several of them. They are not letting their kids swim there, and I think they have every right. So in addition to water quality monitoring, there needs to be sediment monitoring on an ongoing, regular basis. And Rachel may have more to add to that.
No, I think just continued monitoring is important. We know that there can be bacteria that can live happily in sediments over long periods of time, up to months, 6 months, depending on what bacteria we're talking about. So I think it's just the importance of continued monitoring over time, monitoring multiple potential pathogens.
Thank you for that. Godspeed. I hope y'all don't experience it because it's going to be a lot more than just on the river. If midges hit, it'll be a huge area that extends way beyond that because that's what we're now at Eastern Baltimore County. I hope that doesn't happen, but you have a formula here for that to occur.
Yeah. Thank you, Delegate Naraki, I think. Delegate Grammer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The testing now, the monitoring, who's doing it now? Who does it going forward? How do you achieve that? How do you facilitate
that? Right now, as we mentioned, in collaboration with the University of Maryland, Potomac Riverkeeper Network is doing it weekly, not just at the site, but all the way downstream to National Harbor. Over the summer months, we monitor weekly as well, just for recreational purposes. So that's what is happening right now, and we anticipate continuing to do that. We think that's not enough. We think there needs to be more. And Dean or Dr. Rachel, maybe you want to opine on that.
And DC Water had mentioned that they are doing daily monitoring now, which is good, but they said for some extended period of time. And that's my point is I'm trying to make is I think this needs to happen throughout the entire summer. If we are going to restore confidence in people coming back to the river, we need to do that, or they need to do that. And I think MDE is going to have to do that as well. If they're concerned about downstream communities, again, you have data and science, but then there's perception. And then there needs to be messaging that goes out to change the perception of the river. And I think that's really, really important.
Is this just a matter of time that you're talking about? And you say like there needs to be more time, or we need to test for different things. Specifically, what do you mean by that?
No, excellent question, actually. And I'm glad you brought that up because right now we've been doing surface monitoring. As we were just discussing, the sediment and the soil underneath can release. So expanding how and what we're monitoring, as well as the geographic area as well. Nobody, to our knowledge, has tested below National Harbor, and that's part of what we need to be doing going forward, is testing a larger area of the river so we can really give dialed in information to people about where it is and is not safe.
And testing for things beyond E. coli, for things that University of Maryland is testing for, like pathogens and other bacteria.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Grammer. I don't see any other hands, but I have a question perhaps for Rachel or maybe Megan Lynch, which is, so the people who live in the vicinity of the breach, the break, what health effects, if any, could there be for them? I mean, obviously, if you go, they have signs up, don't go near the area, but I think one of you, maybe Betsy, someone mentioned about, fumes and, and gases and whatnot. Can you just speak about maybe, whether the people that live in the vicinity of the break, where it's obviously the most toxic, if they have anything, to worry about health-wise, and if so, what is it?
Yes, it's an excellent point that you make and excellent questions. Definitely, we've been advising people as we've been speaking to the media to not come into direct contact with the areas of the Potomac where we're measuring these high levels of bacteria. We know that there can be, especially with the bacteria we're measuring, Staph aureus, skin and soft tissue infections, E. coli, although they're an indicator bacteria, they are also opportunistic pathogens, so they can cause gastrointestinal illnesses, things like vomiting, diarrhea. We are anecdotally, I'm out there with my students every week. I see people still interacting with the Potomac as we move away from Lock 10 downriver. We see people running, we see people walking their dogs. So I think continued messaging until we see levels that are back within these standards is really important. I think air quality monitoring is important. We do know from previous research that bacteria can become aerosolized. We're all very familiar with the idea that there's airborne viruses. We have not been doing that testing, so I can't speak to exactly what the risks are right now at these sites, but I think understanding what those risks are very important.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Well, I want to thank everybody who was here today. Mr. Chair, do you have anything you want to add?
No, thank you again, Madam Chair. This was really helpful.
Yeah, and yeah, I want to thank everybody. I think it was helpful. Thank you very much. We're going to try to get the slide presentations if, for those of you who are still on, who had slide presentations, if you would please forward them to the Environment Transportation Committee. We'll make sure that we get them out to people, because I think that would be useful in us communicating to our constituents and others. So again, thank you very much. That concludes the briefing on from the Non-Energy Utility Subcommittee on the Potomac Interceptor. Thank you. I hope better days are ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.